we can go on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'm hoping that all the students can hear me well without any connecting problems or connection problems, I should say. So one more time, good morning. If you are recorded, then we can start. What I plan to do this morning is to give you some tips how you can study and achieve the best possible grades. First, though, I will also stress a couple of things that I already mentioned in the introductory video and stuff that is in the syllabus as well. I just want to make sure that you follow specific policies, and so we don't have any issues throughout or toward the end of the semester. Okay. I know that you already know Jade, as she already communicated with you and signed you up this morning for the discussion. She is the teaching assistant and she is keeping all of us, including myself, organized and on top of things. So thank you, Jade, for your contribution to the course. And Jade will be also grading your assignment at the end of the semester. If you have any questions, you can send them to me, you can send them to her, and best of all, probably to send them to both of us, in the same time. Okay, you see the first slide on the short PowerPoint that I prepared. Again, this is the first live discussion, and we will have 5 of them, one every week. Okay, so let's go right into the next slide, which is really just the heading. And the heading is exams. It's called exams. Yes. And so I will share with you just a couple of things. Let's go into the next text. Yes. Notice, please, only in rare circumstances permission may be granted to take an exam after the deadline. Okay. For each exam, you will have a time period. It may be 3-4 days, and I think about 2 or 3 days for the final. And so I'm hoping that we will not have a need to move the exam, although things happen. You may get, hopefully not, but if you are admitted to the hospital or something else serious happen, then if you have the grants, we will accommodate you, okay? But please don't count on moving the time you take the exam for just not really a good reason, okay? Secondly, students who have a valid reason to request taking an exam after the deadline, as far as possible, should send a request before the deadline, okay? So we know if we have a student and or how many possibly will have to take the exam after the deadline and when they will be taking the exam, okay? Of course, again, if something suddenly happens, you may not be able to send an email ahead of time and we will accommodate as well. But if you know ahead of time that you cannot take the exam and you have a good reason, send us an email ahead of time. All right, let's look at the next slide. And it's somewhat similar, but it deals with quizzes, okay?
Sorry, Professor, my computer is a bit slow, but it should.
It's okay. We have plenty of time, so we'll wait until the slide populates, okay? And this is taken directly from the syllabus. The very last section of the syllabus is called policies, and this is from the policies regarding quizzes. I actually also quoted this during my video introduction. Quizzes are offered online for several days. This means you can take and submit them from anywhere at your convenience as long as you have access to the internet. Thus, it is unlikely that permission may be granted to make up quizzes if not submitted on time though in rare circumstances, exceptions might be made, okay? We had a case last time when a student not only did not take a few quizzes, but requested permission to take those quizzes several weeks. It was at least 2, perhaps even 3 weeks later. And I did not agree to give permission for this student. And so again, you have approximately a week or so for each quiz. And so please plan your activities accordingly, okay? So in fact, I would urge you not to wait until the day of the deadline. Try to take them earlier. That way, even if there is, say, internet outage or whatever may happen, you still have a day, to submit them. Okay, so I wanted to stress this again because we will be somewhat strict, regarding when you take both quizzes as well as the exams. All right, next slide. In this course, you have one assignment, and you will be working on creating an educational flyer. I would like to encourage you to review the guidelines ahead of time, possibly this week already. Usually, as the semester progresses, you have more and more things to do in the semester. And so in the beginning semester, usually students have a little bit more time. And one reason why it is important is because you will need to choose a program, professional program, to create a flyer, okay? This is not an assignment where you can handwrite or something like that. This might be Microsoft Word, but even if you choose Microsoft Word, we usually just use a letter format of Microsoft Word. We don't usually use a flyer format, okay? It may be Microsoft Publisher. If you have a Mac computer, I'm not sure, I don't use Mac, so I don't know what the equivalent may be, but it will likely be a program that you are not familiar with, or you are not nearly as familiar with as simply writing in a letter format of Microsoft Word. So you may need to play a little bit with the program and figure it out. I know students are very good at that. And on top of that, you will need to decide on the topic and then read and follow the grading criteria. When we grade your assignment, we will apply this criteria, okay? So while you may not be able to complete the assignment at this point of time, because you need to be exposed to some of the information that I will be sharing with you in my videos, and you will need to read a little bit from the textbook. But at least you will be aware of what exactly this assignment is about, okay? So that's important again, and take the time sooner rather than later, and for sure rather than at the last minute, okay? All right, next slide. Okay, and next slide deals with the study tips that I want to share with you. I'm going to share with you some basic, very simple principles, but please understand and trust me, these are very effective principles, okay? I can testify this not only from my own life. I spent more than 20 years in school as a student, but also these tips are supported by literature, published research findings on how high school and college students learn. Okay, so let's go into the first one. The first tip has to do with sleep. Okay, notice get adequate sleep. This term adequate in this context of sleeping does not only mean adequate number of hours or certain number of hours, but it also means sleep at certain time periods. So, for example, students who sleep on average 7 hours per day, okay? and do that typically, habitually, okay, get better grades than students who only sleep, say, 5 hours. That's number one. But number two, students who sleep between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., so they get 8 hours of sleep within that period of time, they get better grades than students who get the same amount, the same number of hours of sleep, but sleep between 2 a.m. and 10 p.m. and rather 10 a.m. 2 and 10 a.m. Okay, so the same number of hours, but somehow that earlier sleep is more important than sleeping through the day, for example. Okay, we can go to the next one, Jay. Okay, the next one is stay physically active. When we do that, the brain is refreshed, even though physically we may feel a little tired after the exercise, but the brain gets refreshed. And that's especially the case if we have time shortly after the exercise to get a short nap, that maybe even 5 to 15 minutes, what we call power nap. Okay, the brain becomes more efficient. Not only it's refreshed, but it becomes very efficient when you are writing, for example, when you are studying and trying to memorize. Seldom I spend more than 5 to 6 hours in my office working on my computer. Okay, not that I only work 5 to 6 hours, I work longer, but I tend to go in early afternoon and play tennis. That's my game, and I may play for an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on a match. And then I come home, take a shower, and I'm ready to work on, the continuation of what I have been working on, a new project or whatever. That's just personal experience. But again, this is supported by literature. Okay, so stay physically active, and if possible, do it every day, even if you just walk. That's also, in fact, one of the best exercises. Right, next one. Every week, do something fun, okay? And go to the beach, depending, of course, where you are. The activity may be different. If you are closer to the mountains, take some hiking. That may be something fun combined with the physical activity aspect. Maybe get with friends and engage in a kosher activity like bowling, for example, playing pool or whatever that might be, okay? Again, this helps us to get our mind off the brain, and then when we come back and try to memorize, try to work on the assignment, it's just that much easier for us to get better grade. All right, next one. Study regularly, not just before an exam. Sometimes students send me an email and they say something to the effect, I really studied hard, I spent so many hours studying and stuff of that nature, or something like, I studied most of the last 2 days before the exam and I still didn't do as well as I expected. And I reply and I say, well, you just described the problem. You spend so many hours studying somewhat on the last minute, rather than regularly, and by that I mean every day. My best ever professor had us, meaning myself and my fellow students in my class, sign an agreement. And in the agreement, it stated that we would be studying 15 minutes every day. And at first, some of us were laughing, only 15 minutes. But that 15 minutes every day, if I followed, and I didn't always follow every day, but most of the day, I was very good at that subject that this professor taught. It was actually in high school, had to do with some electronics issues. I studied something different in high school than what I'm teaching now. And I know this is effective. When you in reality, when you know the exam is a day from today, or even a couple of days, You should be ready at this point of time. And then the last day before the exam, just very brief review, and then you are ready to take the exam, rather than studying and studying and studying 6-8 hours the day before. There is so much material in this class, and it's only 5-week long class, that when you actually are facing 50 different questions, it all will become very confusing. You see? Let's go to the next one. Okay. Do not miss / get 100% on each exam. Retake one if needed. Okay. So number one, do not miss a quiz. Okay. Even though a quiz is 1.5, right? 1.5% of the final grade. Doesn't seem like a lot, but then 1.5 may make a difference between an A and a B as your final grade. So number one, do not miss one. Again, you have a week or so for most of these quizzes, and then get 100. If you take one and you only get 90, you can still get better. Remember in the introductory video, I mentioned that your quizzes are available, each of the quizzes available for 3 attempts. So you don't get the grade that you wanted to, or you don't get 100, retake it, okay? Even just by guessing an answer if you cannot find it, but it's an open book, question. In fact, what I would encourage you to do is to open the quiz, read the first question, and read the chapter. You found the answer, read the second question and look for the answer. You see, that way it will be kind of an efficient way to spend the time reading and in the same time answering the questions. And then you can also mark in your printouts of the PDF, okay, here's answer to question 1, answer to question 2, and so on. And then if you missed one question, then it will be easier for you to actually look for which question or which part I didn't read maybe correctly or something to that effect, that I can correct and get 100 on each of the quizzes. Okay, let's go to the next one. Complete the assignment ahead of time. Again, I would not encourage you to work on it right this moment, but then you could complete it, 3-4 days, say, before the deadline, and then keep it for a couple of days on your computer, then just briefly review, maybe catch typos or something like that, or you have maybe time to ask a friend to review your English on the assignment. That would be advisable. Okay, if it's only editing your English, that's not cheating, that's actually getting help in the area that you may need to get help. Okay, but again, do not wait until the last minute with it. Read the guidelines before and try to complete it maybe at least a couple of days, or maybe 3-4 days before the deadline. Okay, next one. Create a study guide with notes from each lecture. So not only watch the lectures, but take notes. Okay, each week you have somewhere between 12 to 15 or so lectures, and so it would be a good idea to take notes, and then as you study for the exam, ask yourself questions. Which is the next item on this slide, JD, if we can proceed to the next one. It is get together and study, if that's possible. Of course, you may not know anybody in the class, or you may live far, it is online class, so you may live anywhere. It may not be possible. Getting together and study, and by that I mean ask yourself questions. So you do preliminary studying yourself, and then have a friend asking you a question. For example, which are the macronutrients? Which are the micronutrients? Which are the trace minerals? which are the water-soluble vitamins. You see, one student asked a question, the other student gives an answer. If you don't have this possibility of getting together with someone else, ask yourself those questions. When I used to take exams as a student, I used to write down these questions, okay? I would come up with questions myself, and then I would try to write down the answers or list the answers. And if I was only able to list, say, 6 water-soluble vitamins, and I knew that there were 8 of them, and then I would pick into my notes, okay, or into the textbook, and then I would write them once I found them. That would also help to retain, you see. Another one that I want to mention that is again corresponding with the next item on this slide, Jade. The next item.
Sorry, I am clicking it.
Yeah. Okay, good. It's okay. It takes a minute. It's okay. That is, write yourself questions I just mentioned and answer them. And here, not only I mean answer them, meaning you write them down, but you also verbally answer these questions. Okay, you may want to, you could read it, but read it out loud. Okay, or you could just verbally recite them. See, when we study, if we want to use efficient ways of studying and memorizing, we try to use all the senses. So number one, we see, right? When we write, we see what we write. But number two, when you say it out loud, you hear these questions. That is helpful again in retaining the material. Okay, let's go into the next slide, which is a heading: what to study / what you need to know. Okay, and so let's go into the next slide. And I want to point out that in each of the lectures, I listed objectives. Objectives is something that I wanted to address in a given lecture, and objectives is something that you will be tested on from these lectures. You see? So very simple here, using these examples here, list different types of nutrition research and summarize their application. You may not have gotten to that yet in the videos, but I mentioned things such as randomized studies, case control studies, cohort studies, prospective studies, laboratory studies, and things of that nature. Okay, so number one, being able to list them, okay, but also you need to have a basic understanding so you can summarize how or what is the nature of, say, a case control study or prospective study. Why do we use one versus another? Things of that nature, okay? And then also taking an example from the same video, the next one, define common terms used in describing research findings: odds ratio and incidence, prevalence, and stuff like that. So being able to describe what these terms mean, okay? And the next slide actually gives you a list of the studies. And again, this is just taken to give you an example, okay? So types of research studies: epidemiological studies, okay, that include case control studies, cross-sectional studies, prospective cohort studies, and stuff like that, okay? And if we go to the next one, and again, each lecture has the list of objectives. You see, these are just additional examples. Let's go to the next. Okay, so again, your exams will have questions based on my lectures and we'll also have questions based on the textbook/course pack. Okay, so I want to emphasize a few things, what you will need to know from the course pack reading on the exam. The quizzes should give you some tips already, but you, I'm sure, have noticed that there are terms in the textbook that are written in bold font, okay? And so when they are written in bold, notice on this slide here that you see on the screen, notice this is part of the sentence. Compounds include fibers. This has to do with non-nutritional compounds called fibers, phytochemicals, anti-nutrients, okay? And so these terms, fibers, phytochemicals, anti-nutrients, are in bold font. Okay, so what are anti-nutrients? Okay, well, you have one listed here. Alcohol is called anti-nutrient. Alcohol actually destroys some nutrients and diminishes status of other nutrients. Phytochemicals, notice you have a definition here. Phyto means plants, chemicals means simply chemical compounds. So these are plant compounds that are not nutrients, but they are found in plant foods, and so on. Fibers, you have explanation later on. But the point I am making is pay attention to terms in bold, okay? There are many of them in each chapter. And if you are using highlighter, highlight those. Again, if you are making notes, separate notes, list all of them, okay? And then another thing is, notice that on this slide we have two tables. And it is my experience, and I've been doing this for about 20 years, that when students read whatever reading material, they tend to skip the information in the table or in a graph. But for me, as someone who wrote this, using a table or using a graph is actually an efficient way to express an idea or list whatever category of, in this case, nutrients that I want to list and things of that nature. And so you will actually be tested on the information that you have in both of these tables and other tables that you have already in chapter 1, for example, okay? Notice we have in table 1.1, classification of nutrients, okay? I may ask you a question. Which of the following are or are not macronutrient, micronutrient, energy yielding nutrient, organic nutrient, and things of that nature, okay? From table 1.2, classifications of vitamins, okay? We have, again, water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins. And then the next table deals with classifications of minerals, okay? Macro or major minerals versus trace or micro minerals, you see? And so it is an easy way, again, for me to list them, and you will be tested on which one is which, okay? When it comes to vitamins, it's actually relatively easy. There are 4 fat-soluble vitamins listed here, A, D, E, and K. All the others are water-soluble. I also would like to mention that for this exam, it will be okay for you to just know B1, vitamin B1, vitamin B2, and so on. But for later on, when we actually discuss the vitamins in some details, I will expect you to know the proper names of these vitamins. So, for example, vitamin C, the proper name is not listed here, but its proper name is ascorbic acid, okay? Vitamin B1, okay, looking at table 1.2, vitamin B1, the proper name is thiamine. Vitamin B2, the proper name is riboflavin, and things of that nature. So later on in the semester, my questions may be asked, which of the following is the best source of vitamin B3, for example? Or I may ask, which of the following is a good source of niacin? Okay, so you need to know that niacin is vitamin B3 in order to answer the question. You see what I'm saying? Okay, let's go into the next slide. Somewhat similar. Again, we have continuation. So you have classification of minerals and then a composition of nutrient, chemical composition. Okay, so we know that most of them contain carbon, some of them contain oxygen. Okay, hydrogen, one only contains nitrogen. In fact, this reminds me of a question. I'm gonna give away one question right now. It is, which of the following nutrients does not contain nitrogen? Or I forget it, I may have asked this, which of the following nutrients does contain nitrogen? You see, only protein contain nitrogen, okay? And of course, minerals only contain minerals, right? Iron, but nothing else but iron, and calcium, but nothing else but calcium, and stuff like that. All right, and water has always been, ever since the beginning of the universe, oxygen and hydrogen, right? Okay. Okay, let's go into the next. This is, I think, the last section in the course book, and it deals with energy synthesis and then how we calculate also energy. Okay, so we have two different units of energy. And again, notice that in this paragraph, they are in bold, calories and joules. Okay, so when we say, a meal contains 500 calories, that literally means kilocalories, as calories, that unit is very, very small. We usually, when we typically talk about the content of calories in a given food, in a meal, or a requirement for an individual, even though we say simply calories, but we refer to kilocalories. Kilocalories is 1,000 times more than just a calorie, okay? But notice also that in the table 1.6, we have the value for how much of the different energy yielding nutrient yields per gram of the nutrient, okay? Carbohydrates 4, protein 4, lipids 9, and then we have one non-nutritive compound, alcohol 7, okay? So I'm going to ask you on the exams a question: how much energy or how many calories is in a given food or in a given meal that contains so many grams of carbohydrates, so many grams of protein, so many grams of lipids, and stuff like that, okay? And I'm stressing this because oftentimes, for reasons I don't completely understand, whether students or whether people in general take a nutrition course or not, they have this idea that vitamins also yield energy, and yet vitamins are not energy yielding nutrients. You see, only carbohydrates, protein, and fat or lipids yield energy, you see. So if I give you a scenario in which a meal contains, I'm going to be guessing now, 50 grams of carbohydrates, 20 grams of protein, 10 grams of lipids, okay? 10 milligrams of vitamins, and 10 milligrams of iron, okay? Or not iron, say minerals, okay? And a cup of water. What is the energetic value, or what are the number, how many calories are in that meal, okay? All you need to do is calculate the value for macronutrients, for energy yielding nutrients. Macronutrients, energy yielding nutrients are the same with the exception of water, okay? Vitamins, minerals, they are given, but they don't yield energy. So they are not taken into the calculation of the energy content of the meal. You see? Make sure you remember that, okay? Notice again, just back to bold terms. We have here mitochondria in bold. What's mitochondria? I may ask you this on your exam, right? Mitochondria is the organelle within a cell where the energy synthesis actually takes place. You see? Okay, let's go into the next slide. And yet another example here, this example is from chapter 2. I'm stressing this because I think this is important. If you keep in mind that you need to remember the bold or the definitions or the classifications or whatever the context the bold terms are given in, okay? That will help you a lot in getting a better grade on the exam. So here we have a structure of a grain kernel, whether we are talking rice or wheat or barley or oat or whatever the grain type is, okay? Notice we have one layer called outer shell, then we have another layer called germ, then we have another layer called endosperm, okay? And I mentioned this in my lectures, in one of my lectures as well. And yet I see students every semester missing this question, okay? There's no reason for that, okay? There's no reason. It's very simple. There are 3 layers in each grain kernel. One is in the outer shell, 2 in the inner shell. One has more nutrients, the germ, micronutrients especially. The other only contains protein and starch or carbohydrates. Very, very simple, okay? All right, let's go into another one, another slide that is, or another page, okay? Notice we have in bold here celiac disease. So after reading this, you should be able to recall what is the nature of celiac disease, right? It is very dependent on what we eat. I will not go ahead of it, of what is in the course pack. You may have already read it since it is from chapter 2. But another thing I want to stress is that and the information in the table, okay? The information in the table contains a list of gluten-containing and gluten-free grains. And for individuals with celiac disease, it would be essential, absolutely critical, to use the gluten-free grains, but never use gluten-containing grains because that compound called gluten can exacerbate the symptoms of celiac disease. Okay, so again, you need to be familiar with what's in this table, for example. Okay, and this is the information that I prepared for you. We have about 15 minutes left, I think. So let me ask if there are any questions from students. Students, be brave. If you have any questions, this is the opportunity for us to answer your questions if you may have any. Okay, I'll give you a minute. If I don't hear any questions, then we will pretty much wrap it up.
Thank you, Professor, and everyone. Feel free to ask any questions to Professor Pollock or to me. Yeah, and also I just want to add that if any of you want me to go through your flyer assignment before you submit it, you can just send me your draft and via WeChat, and I will go through it with you and make any possible improvements to make sure that you're on the right track. Yeah, other than that, for every week, I will prepare a small review note for you to go through the important things, but please do not count that as do not count on that, because you still need to study by yourself in order to understand my review notes. If you just grab my review notes and go to an exam without studying it, it will not help you in any ways. Yeah, so that's what I would like to add. Professor Pollock, would you like to say anything else?
Not really. Thank you for adding this info. Let's just wait a few seconds and see if there might be any questions. If you if you are kind of shy to speak, you can type those questions if you have any, okay? And if nothing, you can think of now in terms of questions, you could send the questions to us in an email, okay? But let's give a minute. And again, if we don't see questions, we will end. Okay, it doesn't look like we have questions, correct?
Well,
okay.
I don't think...
Yes?
No, I mean, maybe they don't have any questions right now.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, I think you can think of in terms of question, that's fine, no problem. Which means we will end about 12 minutes ahead of time, and you can take time to study, answer another quiz or whatever, okay? Thank you all for joining, and I will see you next week sometimes, okay? Thank you, Jade.
Thank you, Professor Pollock. For students, please wait before I open up the sign out app. Yes, and Professor, I think yes, you're good to go now. Thank you very much for giving us this amazing.
Thank you. I see you. Okay.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice week.
Bye. You too.
好，同学们，大家看一下，我已经发起了签退的通道哦。虽然它显示还是签到，但是我已经把之前签到通道给关闭了，所以说大家也不会误点到之前的签到通道。现在的这一个签退通道，大家直接点进去，点击签到就可以了，没有关系，我知道它是签退的。好，那么这一个签退的时间。签退的时间是从现在开始起计时5分钟，请同学们在这一个5分钟之内完成签退哦，不然咱们就要算缺勤了。大家加油，拼一下手速，冲冲冲！同样的，没有办法签退的同学，微信私信给我就可以。找不到通道，同学微信私信我哦，私信我，下载不出来也私信我。炫萌卡住了，你卡在哪儿了？按不出，按不出，可能是它需要一点时间刷新，它每次打开可能要几秒钟才能刷新成功的。大家那个不用着急，现在离5分钟还有很久很久，所以大家看它能不能刷出来，等它半分钟的样子。好，看到顶月签退、雨涵签退、谢欣让我帮忙看看有没有签退。看一看哈。好像没有看到，那就微信跟我签吧。好，看到大部分同学都已经完成签退啦。我们现在还有3分钟，太棒了！签退的同学们就可以离场了哦，不用舍不得，我们去干你们自己的事儿吧。晚安，如果是国内的同学。已经签退的就可以离场了哦。看到大家说辛苦，没有不辛苦哦，大家也辛苦啦，早点睡觉，白天的回去再睡个回笼觉，这么早起来，对不对？好，签退了就离场吧，不然我会以为大家可能还没签退，然后就会在这边一直催大家。 好，微信跟我签了，可以，可以的。现在在场的还有1、2、3、4、5、6、7位小朋友，你们是怎么回事哦？怎么回事哦？还没有签退吗？睡着了吗？睡昏过去了吗？好，看到签退的张弛，签不了，海怡签不了的话，就在微信里面跟我讲吧，在微信里面跟我发送张海怡签退，其他同学也是签退不了吗？好啦，我们签退的时间已经截止啦。这在场的4位小朋友，不知道你们是不是有签退到？如果没有签退的话，就抱歉喽。我们严格按照 JNC 和FCU 的考勤制度来落实。谢谢大家，拜拜喽。